For 2 centuries, the legend of the blindfolded alien spread across the galaxy, whispered in markets of desert worlds and carried in songs among starship crews. She was said to sit in silence deep inside a forgotten temple on a ruined planet, her face hidden behind a strip of black cloth. No one knew her name anymore, they only called her the Blind Seer. Her story was one of fear and mystery, for every record told of travelers who dared to approach and never returned. Some claimed she was a goddess punished by her own kind. Others said she was a weapon so dangerous her eyes had to be sealed so that the galaxy might live. Across generations, people spoke of the blindfold with hushed voices. Elders warned their young not to go near it. Scholars argued about its origin, but none were brave enough to test it. Whole fleets once passed near the forgotten planet without daring to land. The temple stood in silence, vines covering its stone walls, the blind seer unmoving like a statue. Time flowed, but she remained, and the blindfold never shifted, an unbroken vigil that spanned centuries. When humans entered the wider galaxy, they heard the tale, and like many species before them, they were warned not to be foolish. Yet humanity carried something different inside them, a restless fire that refused to kneel before myths where others felt only fear. Humans felt challenge where others turned away. Humans leaned closer, and so it was that a young human explorer named Elias found himself tracing old maps through dusty archives until he discovered the coordinates of the cursed world. The warnings rang in his ears, but he ignored them. His ship landed on the broken plains outside the temple. The air was dry and heavy, the sky tinted. With the light of a dying sun, the ruins stretched before him, jagged stones half buried in the sand but still carrying strange carvings that glowed faintly, as if alive with ancient energy. Each step echoed against the silence as Elias walked toward the entrance. There was no sound of wind, no cry of animals. It was as if the whole world held its breath. He remembered the voices of alien scholars telling him to turn back. They said no one dared remove her blindfold for 200 years. They said her eyes held something no mind should see. Some even claimed that the cloth itself was alive, feeding on fear, binding a power that must never be freed. Elias had laughed at them at first, but now standing at the mouth of the temple, he felt unease crawl through his chest. He tightened his grip on the lantern he carried and stepped inside. The temple was dark. The air-stale pillars rose around him, covered with carvings of stars and swirling galaxies, scenes of battles and beings bowing before. A woman with burning eyes. The deeper he walked, the stronger the air pressed against him like invisible weight. And yet he moved forward, guided by stubborn curiosity and the human refusal to retreat. At last, he reached the inner chamber. There she sat upon a throne of stone, her posture graceful, her skin pale as moonlight, her face still and perfect, framed by long dark hair. The black blindfold covered her eyes tight at the back of her head. Not a wrinkle marked her flesh, though she had sat here for centuries. Her hands rested on her lap as if she were only sleeping. Her breathing was soft and steady. Elias froze, his heart pounding. He felt as if he had stepped into a dream. Every story he had ever heard now seemed too small. None had captured the weight of her presence. It was as if the galaxy itself bent around her. He took a step closer, his boots scraping the stone. The sound echoed like thunder in the silence. She did not stir. Her head tilted slightly, but her eyes remained hidden behind the cloth. Elias whispered without thinking, and his voice cracked as it left his throat. "You have been waiting for someone." The words hung in the still air, unanswered. His skin prickled with fear and wonder, and he felt the gravity of choice pressing down on him. For 200 years the galaxy had feared to approach, yet here he stood, a lone human, trembling before the mystery that none had dared to solve. And though fear clawed at his chest, he knew he would not turn back. Not ever. Elias stood in the chamber, unable to move, his eyes locked on the woman who had been the subject of fear and rumor for centuries. He felt as though the air itself thickened with every breath, and the silence pressed against his ears. Like a weight, he whispered again, but she did not answer. Her stillness was unbroken, yet something about the faint tilt of her head made him feel as though she was aware of his presence, as though she had always been waiting for him. He thought back To the warnings that had filled his journey, the alien scholars in the station halls had shaken their heads and muttered about madness. One reptilian merchant had even spat on the ground when he learned of Elias's quest, calling him a fool doomed to die. Another elder had said that the temple was cursed, that every species in the galaxy had tried to unravel the mystery and failed because they lacked the will or the mind to endure what lay behind the blindfold. Elias had listened, but deep. Inside, he felt the stubbornness of humanity burn brighter, the same fire that had carried his people from their small blue world into the stars while others feared humans ventured forward. Now that fire wavered for a moment because the woman before him was not a statue, not a corpse. Her chest rose gently with breath, her lips faintly curved as though she dreamed, and though the black cloth sealed her eyes, the air around her seemed alive, humming faintly like invisible strings being plucked. He took another step forward and his voice steadied as he spoke. I came to see the truth. No more legends, no more fear. Only truth. The chamber did not answer, but he felt the weight shift, as if acknowledging his words. Elias set his lantern on the floor, its glow spilling across the carvings on the walls. They told more stories. Entire fleets burned in flame. Warriors bowing in despair, and always her eyes glowing like suns in the center of it all. He reached out his hand, tracing one carving, and the stone felt warm as if alive. He pulled back, startled. He thought of leaving for just a moment. His heart begged him to turn around, to walk back into the desert and never return. But then, he remembered the looks of the aliens when he had first announced his mission. They had laughed, they had doubted, they had claimed no human could understand the weight of what had been sealed, and something inside Elias hardened. No, he would not walk away. He would not be another coward who feared a strip of cloth. As he moved closer to the throne, he saw that the blindfold itself was not ordinary fabric. It shimmered faintly like starlight bound in threads. Each knot pulsed as though it carried a heartbeat. The longer he stared, the dizzier he felt. His vision swam with flickers of light stars spiraling in the corner of his sight until he blinked them away. The cloth was alive or bound to something alive, and it warned him silently that removing it would not be without cost. He clenched his fists and whispered to steady himself. You are human, you do not bow before shadows. He thought of his ancestors who had crossed oceans in fragile ships, who had walked on the surface of the moon, who had fought against odds that no one believed they could overcome. This was no different. It was only another frontier, only another wall to break through. His breath came slow and steady now, though his pulse thundered like drums inside his chest. Then for the first time her lips parted. She did not open her eyes, but a sound passed through the chamber. Soft and ancient, her voice was a whisper, yet it filled every corner of the temple. Leave the cloth alone, human. Her words were calm, yet heavy like the weight of entire worlds. Her head tilted slightly, and the blindfold seemed to darken as though swallowing the lantern light. Elias's throat tightened. He wanted to speak, but no sound came. The woman spoke again, her voice smoother than before. You do not know what you reach for. Your kind has courage, but courage alone will not save you. Her words sank into him, stirring both fear and defiance. He wanted to demand answers, to ask why she had been bound for centuries, and what her eyes could reveal. But the warning in her tone was unmistakable. Still, he remembered every tale told in fear, every being that had passed by this place and chosen silence. He remembered the hunger in humanity to know, to see, to defy limits, and something inside him refused to yield. Elias knelt before her throne, his eyes fixed on the faint shimmer of the blindfold. His voice finally broke free, steady and strong. I will see, he said. I will see what no one else has dared to see. The chamber trembled, faint dust falling from the ceiling. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, though her eyes remained hidden. The air thickened with expectation, as if the entire galaxy leaned closer, waiting to witness what came next. The silence after his words stretched long and heavy, and Elias could feel his heart beating, louder than the echoes of the temple. It was as if the chamber itself waited for his next breath. The woman remained still on her throne, yet the faintest curve of her lips made him wonder if she had been expecting this moment for far longer than he could imagine. The blindfold shimmered softly, pulsing in rhythm with something deep and ancient that pressed against his mind. The air carried a weight like a storm about to break. Elias rose from his knees and took another step closer, though every instinct screamed at him to stop. He thought of the galaxy outside that lived in fear of a strip of cloth. He thought of the laughter of alien scholars who had told him he would fail, and he thought of the hunger that defined humanity, the need to step forward where others refused. It was not arrogance alone, it was defiance against being ruled by fear. He whispered again, not to her but to himself. I will not turn back. I will not leave in silence. The woman tilted her head at his words, and for the first time her hand moved. She raised it slowly, as if lifting a great weight. Her fingers brushed the edge of the blindfold, and Elias felt the chamber shift around them as though the walls themselves held their breath. Her voice filled the air, low and resonant. If you untie this, you will see more than your eyes were made to hold. You will carry what others could not carry, and you may never return whole. Her words should have broken his resolve, but instead they sharpened it. For he had always believed that humans were not like the others. They broke when others bent. They endured when others fell. And if any being could look upon what lay hidden, it would be one of his kind. He stepped closer until he stood at the base of the throne. The blindfold glimmered faintly in the lantern light. Threads of black and silver twisted together, forming patterns that seemed to move. When he stared too long, he reached out his hand. Hovering inches from the cloth, the air grew colder. His skin prickled as if unseen eyes watched from every corner. He thought of the risk of madness of never returning, but another thought struck him harder. If he left now, he would always wonder, and that would be worse than any curse. His hand trembled, but he forced it steady as he touched the cloth. It felt smooth like silk, yet alive beneath his fingers. It thrummed with a hidden heartbeat. The woman did not resist, her face tilted upward, slightly as though inviting him to decide. The carvings on the walls flickered with faint light stars, spiraling across the stone. Her voice came again, soft but piercing. Once you see, there will be no turning away. Once you see, you will change, and the galaxy will change with you. Do you still wish to carry this burden? Elias swallowed hard, his throat dry, but his answer was clear. Yes, his voice shook, but the word carried all the weight of his kind. Yes, I will see. With that, he began to pull at the knot. The cloth resisted at first, as though it clung to her flesh, unwilling to let go. Then with a soft snap, the first knot unraveled. The hum in the chamber deepened. The air vibrated through his bones. His lantern flickered, though no wind touched it. He felt dizziness rise as faint lights danced before his vision. Yet he continued, his hands tugging at the second knot. Sweat rolled down his temples and his breath came ragged, but still he pulled. The woman remained still, her lips curved in a knowing expression. Her chest rose slowly as if with relief. When at last the second knot loosened, the blindfold slackened across her face, the threads unraveling like strands of night falling apart. Elias felt a rush of energy surge through the chamber, pressing against his chest and shaking the floor. He staggered but held firm, clutching the cloth now lifeless in his hands. For the first time in 200 years, her eyes were free. They remained closed for a heartbeat, the silence deafening. Then slowly her lids lifted and Elias froze as the impossible began to reveal itself. When her eyes opened, Elias felt the air rip apart around him, as if the chamber no longer belonged to stone and silence, but to something infinite and alive. Her gaze was not the gaze of a woman. It was a window into eternity within those eyes. Stars burned, whole galaxies spun. Worlds were born and died in a shimmer of light. He staggered backward, his knees nearly giving way. His breath caught in his throat, for no mind should have been able to look upon such a sight and remain whole. Yet he could not look away. Her eyes were endless oceans of fire and void, spirals of color and light weaving together like a living cosmos. He saw storms rage across alien worlds and suns ignite in newborn brilliance. He saw fleets of ships consumed in flame, and civilizations rise and fall within a blink of her gaze. It was beauty beyond reason, but also terror, because within that beauty moved something darker, shadows, twisting in the corners of the galaxies inside her eyes, forms too vast to name. drifting between the stars like predators waiting to be loosed. Elias's chest heaved. His heart pounded so loud he thought it would burst, yet his legs held firm even. As his mind reeled, no alien had ever dared to look upon this, no one had dared, because they had known what waited in those eyes. And yet he was human, and humans did not yield to fear. His voice cracked as he whispered, "What are you?" The woman lowered. Her gaze and the galaxies within her eyes shifted. Their storms calmed and the lights dimmed. She spoke with a tone that shook the walls of the temple. "I am not what I once was. These eyes were given to me, not born. They are the prison of an ancient, power older than this galaxy. A predator that devours stars and bends minds to ash. It has been bound inside me for 2 centuries, and the blindfold was the last seal without it." The galaxy trembles. Elias felt a chill run down his spine, but his jaw tightened. He asked, "Why leave you here? Why not end it?" Her lips curved with sorrow because no one can destroy it, only contain it. The council of old who ruled before your species was known, feared the beast more than death itself. They sealed it within me and bound me here for eternity. I was to remain hidden unseen until the end of time, but time always brings the curious. Her eyes shifted again, and for a heartbeat Elias thought he saw shapes pressing against the galaxies within, forms writhing. Against the prison walls her voice dropped softer now, and it carried both pain and warning. "You have freed my sight, human, and with it you have loosened the chain. The seal weakens with every moment you stand here soon. The beast will feel the cracks, and soon it will reach for the galaxy again." The weight of her words crashed down on Elias, yet he did not collapse. Instead, he felt the same fire that had driven him across stars surge stronger, the fire that made humans climb mountains, sail uncharted, seas and step onto the void of space while others cowered. "If the seal weakens, then we strengthen it," he said, his voice raw but firm. "If no one else could hold it, then I will help you hold it." The woman tilted her head, her galaxies flickering with faint light like the birth of new suns. "You do not understand what you offer. No one survives the gaze of eternity, no one carries its burden without shattering." Elias shook his head. "We are human. We break and we mend. We fall and we rise. We carry more than anyone believes we can." His words echoed through the chamber, and for the first time her lips formed a faint, true smile, though sorrow lingered in her eyes. The ground trembled, dust falling from the ceiling. The carvings on the walls glowed fiercely, and Elias felt the presence of something vast pressing against them, as if hearing her confession. The prison stirred the shadows within her eyes, writhed, hungering to escape. He braced himself, every muscle tight, sweat dripping down his brow, and though terror filled his bones, he whispered again, steady and unyielding, "Then we fight." The woman's eyes blazed with galaxies spiraling faster as her voice rose with a power that shook the stones together. "Then we fight human together." A tremor that shook the temple did not fade. Instead, it grew deeper, as if the entire planet felt the stirring of what was locked inside her eyes. Elias braced himself against the throne, his jaw clenched as waves of pressure rolled across the chamber. Like invisible tides, the woman sat upright, her gaze burning brighter with stars spinning faster than before, and for the first time, her voice carried strain as though she fought against something vast and merciless. The air thickened until every breath felt like pulling stone through his lungs. Elias forced himself to remain standing, sweat dripping down his back, though his body screamed for him to kneel. His human stubbornness refused the weight. He remembered every warning, every alien voice that had told him this moment would break him. But still he stood defiant, even as shadows pressed against the light within her eyes. The woman's voice filled the chamber, though it wavered between strength and desperation. "The beast stirs. It feels the blindfold gone. It hungers for release." She raised her hands and light poured from her palms, forming a barrier across the room, symbols of flame and starlight weaving into a shield. Elias stared in awe, but behind the beauty, he saw the strain in her arms, the way her body trembled, though she fought to hide it. Elias stepped closer, his voice sharp through the roar of unseen energy. "Then let me help you tell me what to do." Her head turned toward him, her galaxies swirling like storms. "You cannot," she said softly. No mortal can share this burden, it tears even gods apart, and yet as her eyes met his, she faltered because she saw something in him that was different, not arrogance but will raw and unyielding. Elias placed a hand on the throne. His fingers brushing the cold stone, he spoke not as a warrior but as a human who had inherited a legacy of resilience. You were left alone for 2 centuries, because every species feared what you carried, but humanity does not walk away. We face the impossible and call it a challenge. If this thing is pressing to escape, then give me a share of the weight. Let me carry what I can. For a long moment she only stared at him, her galaxies flickering as though considering his words. Then slowly she lowered her hands. The shield remained, but her arms fell to her sides. Her voice carried both wonder and sorrow. No one has ever asked to share it. No one has ever dared. The ground shook again, louder stones cracking above them. Elias raised his voice over the thunder. Then let humanity be the first, he said. Let us prove that fear does not chain us. Her lips curved faintly, and for the first time since her eyes were revealed, she nodded. Very well, human. But know this once. You see fully, you will never unsee. Once you touch the prison, it will touch you and it will follow you forever. Elias did not hesitate. I am ready. She raised her hand toward his chest, her palm glowing with faint silver light. When her touch met his heart, Elias gasped as the chamber vanished from around him, replaced by a vast, endless void. Stars stretched out across infinity, and in the center loomed a shadow, larger than worlds. It writhed with countless limbs and faces that flickered in and out of existence. Its roar was silent, yet it shattered his mind with terror. This was the beast that her eyes contained. Elias felt himself pulled toward the darkness, but a spark lit inside him, the same spark that had carried his ancestors through every trial. He shouted into the void, though his voice was small. I am human, you will not break me. The beast surged against him, its hunger pressing like fire through his veins, yet he endured, sweat pouring from his skin, his muscles burning his vision, swimming with light. But he did not fall. He anchored himself in memories of Earth, the oceans, the forests, the voices of his people, the laughter of children, the dreams of those who dared to reach the stars. He clung to those images, and the beast faltered for the first time. The woman's voice echoed through the void, strong now like thunder. You hold when none should hold you, endure when none should endure. Her galaxies flared brighter, wrapping Elias in spirals of light. Together they pressed back against the beast, forcing it deeper into the prison shadows, screaming silently as the chains tightened once more. When Elias opened his eyes, he was back in the temple, his knees weak, his body trembling, but he still stood. The woman gazed at him with awe, her voice soft and filled with something he had not heard before. Hope you survived where none should have survived. Elias straightened, though every muscle screamed with pain, his eyes steady on hers. Maybe that is what it means to be human. The temple groaned as if the stones themselves had felt the clash between light and shadow. Elias could barely keep his footing. His legs trembled, his chest burned, but his eyes stayed fixed on the woman. Her galaxies shimmered with new intensity, yet within them, he still saw the restless movement of the beast clawing at the edges of its prison. Though chained once more, it had tasted the breach, and it would not surrender quietly. The woman lowered her hands, her breath uneven, her voice a whisper, heavy with centuries of silence now broken. You have done what no being has done. You touched the prison, and still you stand. She studied him with wonder, her lips curving in the faintest smile, but her gaze darkened quickly. This is not over, human. The seal weakens faster now because of what we did together. The beast will test the walls again and again until the final moment comes. Elias wiped sweat from his brow, his throat raw, but his voice steady. Then we hold the walls again and again until they cannot fall. Her eyes shimmered with sorrow. You speak with certainty, but you do not understand each time it pushes. More of me slips away. I was chosen because I could bear it yet. Even I am fading. He stepped closer, his hand brushing the cold stone of the throne, his voice strong with stubborn resolve. Then you will not bear it alone, not anymore. Humanity has walked through fire and ruin for every step we have taken. If the beast pushes, we push back together. For the first time in 200 years, her head bowed not in defeat but in quiet reverence, she whispered. Your kind is reckless, and yet in your recklessness there is strength. Her galaxies brightened until the chamber glowed with their light. The ground trembled again and the carvings on the walls shifted as if alive stars in their stone constellations flickering. Elias felt a pressure crawl across his mind, a whisper that was not a voice, but a hunger. It promised endless power. It promised release if he would only step aside. It tempted with visions of worlds bent to his will, fleets kneeling before him, entire galaxies burning at his command. He clenched his fists and shut his eyes against the visions, his heart hammering. He spoke through gritted teeth. I am not yours. I will never be yours. The whisper recoiled like smoke struck by wind. The pressure lessened, though the weight still lingered. The woman's voice rang clear. Then the beast knows you now. It will not stop reaching for you. Elias opened his eyes. His face pale, but his jaw set. Then let it try. Her galaxies flared brighter and the shadows shrank into the corners of her gaze. The air steadied, though tension still crackled like lightning around them. Elias felt his body ache, every muscle screaming, but the fire of defiance still burned within him. The woman rose from her throne, her figure tall and regal, her long hair flowing like midnight around her face. The blindfold now lay at Elias's feet, torn and powerless. She looked down at him and spoke with strength that carried across the chamber. You have broken the silence of centuries, human. You have carried a burden no one should bear, and still you stand. I was cursed to believe I would fade alone. But you have shown me another path. Elias felt the gravity of her words, but he only shook his head. You were never meant to fade alone. The galaxy might fear your eyes, but humanity does not fear. Fear is only a wall, and walls are made to be broken. Her lips curved into a fuller smile. Sorrow mingled with hope. Then she raised her gaze once more. The galaxies inside her eyes spun faster, brighter, their light filling every crack of the temple. The beast raged within, clawing against the chains. But Elias felt no terror now, only the certainty that this fight was not finished yet. His voice steady, he whispered, then let it come. The chamber pulsed with light, brighter and brighter, until the walls shook, the stars within her gaze bursting like storms. Elias stood unyielding, ready for whatever came next. The final battle had begun. The light in the chamber grew so fierce Elias could hardly see the walls anymore. The temple seemed to dissolve into a vast sea of stars and fire. The woman stood at the center, her eyes blazing with entire galaxies, swirling and colliding, her voice rising like thunder as she fought to contain the beast within shadows, thrashed against her gaze, slamming against the prison as if to shatter it. With sheer hunger, the roar of its silent voice pressed into Elias's skull, filling him with visions of ruined worlds split apart, suns swallowed into blackness, fleets reduced to drifting. Elias staggered, but he planted his feet and raised his voice against the storm, though it cracked under the pressure. I am human, and I will not fall. He felt the weight of the prison pressing into his chest, his mind screaming with the burden, but he refused to let it break him again and again. The beast hurled visions at him, promising power, threatening endless torment. But he clung to the same thought that had carried him this far. Humanity does not bow. The woman turned her gaze upon him, her galaxies spilling light across his body, and he felt warmth cut through the crushing shadows. Her voice filled him. Human, if you anchor me, I can close it forever, but you will see it all. You will see every horror, every hunger that it carries. Once seen, it will never leave you. Elias did not hesitate. Do it, he shouted, his voice breaking. But strong, do it and let the galaxy breathe. Again. Her hands rose, light bursting from her palms as she bound the shadows with chains of flame and starlight. Elias felt them lash into his chest, burning into his soul. His knees buckled, but he did not collapse. He screamed, not in surrender, but in fury, refusing to yield. The beast clawed into his mind, its endless hunger pouring into him, showing him images of earth burning, showing him the faces of his people twisted in agony. But he fought back with memory. He clung to the sight of oceans and forests, the sound of laughter, the strength of humanity's will. The chamber shook harder, stones splitting above them, dust falling like rain. But the woman's voice cut through the chaos. Strong and unshaken hold Elias hold. And he did with every breath, with every shred of strength he locked the beast inside, forcing the shadows deeper. The galaxies in her eyes spun faster, burning brighter until they became like twin suns. The chains tightened, shadows screamed without sound, and then with one final burst of light the prison sealed. Silence fell sudden and absolute. Elias collapsed to one knee, gasping, his body trembling. But alive, the woman stood tall, her eyes still burning with galaxies, but calmer now. The beast subdued, her voice soft, yet filled with awe. You did what none in the galaxy believed possible. You carried the gaze of eternity, and you did not break. Elias raised his head, his face pale but his eyes steady. We are human. We may bend, but we do not break. She reached down, lifting him to his feet, her touch steady and warm. For 2 centuries I believed I was condemned to sit in silence, waiting for the end. Yet you have given me something I thought lost forever. Hope. Her lips curved into a smile, and for the first time it was free of sorrow. Elias looked at the torn blindfold lying on the ground, its threads lifeless. He knew the galaxy would never see her the same way again. The legend of the blind seer would change from fear into something new. And he also knew the beast would never forget him. It would linger in his dreams, in his blood, waiting. Yet he did not fear it, because humanity had faced worse and endured. The woman's gaze softened, her galaxies glowing faintly like dawn breaking through night. She whispered, "Thank you, human." And he answered, with quiet certainty, "No, thank you for trusting me." Together they stepped out of the temple into the dying light of the sun above the ruins. The sky glowed red and gold, the wind stirring for the first time in centuries, carrying the promise of change. Elias breathed deep, his chest aching but filled with fire, and though he knew the struggle was not finished, he also knew the galaxy had witnessed something it would never forget. Humanity had stood where none dared, and had not fallen. And so the story of the blind seer ended not with silence and fear, but with hope, and the unyielding strength of a single human who dared to see what none would see. The temple was quiet now, yet the silence was no longer heavy with dread, but with the weight of something finished. Elias stood with his body weak, his breath shallow, but his spirit unbroken. The woman whose eyes had been sealed for centuries looked at him with galaxies calmer than before. Their light soft like embers after fire, her voice gentle after thunder. You have carried the storm, human, and still you remain whole. He met her gaze, and though he still saw stars burning and shadows moving in the distance, he did not flinch. He knew the beast would always linger at the edge of his mind, whispering, tempting, clawing, but he also knew he had faced it once and he had endured, and that truth gave him strength. He answered in a voice rough with exhaustion, but steady. Humanity was made for storms. We cross them and we rise again. Stepped closer, her figure tall against the ruins. Her presence no longer a curse but a symbol of survival. She placed her hand on his shoulder, a gesture filled with quiet respect. No chains, no blindfold, only trust. For the first time in 200 years her head lifted toward the sky, her galaxies reflecting the fading sun, as if the heavens above bowed to her freedom. Outside the temple, the broken world seemed to stir, winds sweeping across the desert for the first time in generations, as if the land itself had been waiting for this moment. Elias breathed deeply, tasting dust and life in the air, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He knew the galaxy would hear of what happened here, and fear would twist the tale. But somewhere hidden in those whispers there would also be hope, because a human had dared where no one dared and returned, not broken but stronger. The woman spoke again, her words soft, yet carrying across the sands the seal will hold. But not forever. There will come a day when it stirs again, and the galaxy must be ready. Elias straightened his back, though pain lanced through him, his voice firm. Then we will be ready. She smiled, not with sorrow, but with pride. For the first time in centuries, her voice no longer burdened with despair. Then you will not stand alone, Elias. Together, we will remind the stars that fear does not rule us. The sky darkened with the first lights of night, stars blooming above, endless and bright. Elias lifted his head to them, his heart steady. Even as shadows whispered faintly in the back of his mind, he felt the weight, But he carried it as his ancestors had carried every burden before him, step by step without surrender. He turned to the woman, her galaxies glowing beside him like twin suns, and he knew the galaxy would never be the same. The story that began with silence ended with defiance, and in that defiance was the seed of freedom. Elias had walked into legend and humanity with him, and though the path ahead would be filled with storms, he would walk it with unbroken steps beside the woman who had once been feared but was now free. The end.